step into the world of Elizabeth's stories, where every tale is a spark, every secret a whisper, and every victory a flame that lights the way. I'm Elizabeth, your guide through stories that pulse with mystery heart and the unbreakable strength of those who rise above betrayal to reclaim their truth. Whether it's a journey through family secrets or the discovery of a strength you never knew you had, Elizabeth's Stories is where emotions meet enchantment. Don't miss a single tale. Subscribe now to join our growing community of story lovers. Hit that red button, tap the bell, and let's dive into the next chapter together. Share your thoughts, your stories in the comments below. I read everyone. New videos drop every week filled with twists, truths, and moments that stay with you. Welcome to Elizabeth's Stories, where your story matters and the truth always finds its voice. Subscribe today. The air in Vivian Harrington's grand dining hall was heavy with secrets, the kind that clung to the walls, like ivy whispering truths no one dared speak aloud. I stood at the threshold, my heart a drumbeat against my ribs, as 23 pairs of eyes turned toward me. The chandelier above glittered like a constellation trapped in crystal, casting fractured light across the mahogany table where the Harrington family sat, their faces a gallery of practiced smiles and veiled disdain. I was Nadia, 34, a woman who had carved her own path from the ashes of a modest upbringing, only to find myself at the edge of a gilded abyss. The servers moved with choreographed grace, their silver trays gleaming as they placed sizzling Wagyu steaks before each guest. The aroma of seared meat and truffle-infused potatoes filled the room, a decadent promise of indulgence. But when a server reached my place at the table, he paused, his eyes flickering with unease. Instead of a steaming plate, he set down a single unadorned dish, a plain garden salad, its wilted leaves mocking me under the chandelier's glow. The contrast was stark, a silent proclamation of my place in this family, an outsider tolerated but never embraced. I gripped the edge of my chair, the black silk of my dress purchased with 3 months' savings, feeling suddenly too tight. My husband Derek sat beside me, his attention lost in a murmured conversation with his brother about stock portfolios. He didn't notice the salad, didn't see the way the other guests' glances darted toward me, then away as if my exclusion were a shameful secret they were complicit in keeping. The room seemed to tilt, the candlelight flickering like a warning. Why does Nadia have a salad when everyone else has steak? The voice cut through the hum of polite chatter, sharp and unyielding. It was Aunt Margot, my mother's sister, her silver hair catching the light like a beacon. She sat across from me. Her deep blue gown, a quiet rebellion against the Harringtons' monochrome elegance. Her question hung in the air, a challenge that silenced the clink of silverware. Vivian, my mother-in-law, presided at the head of the table, her posture regal, her designer gown shimmering like liquid obsidian. Her smile was a blade, thin and precise, as she turned her gaze on me. I only ordered for family, she said, her voice honeyed but laced with venom. The words landed like a spell, binding the room in a suffocating hush. 23 faces froze their expressions, a mix of discomfort and curiosity, as if waiting to see how I would unravel under her decree. I felt the weight of their stares, each one a thread in the intricate web Vivian had woven to keep me at the fringes of her world. But something stirred within me, a spark ancient and unyielding born from years of clawing my way out of obscurity. I was no stranger to being underestimated, but tonight that spark felt different, like an ember on the verge of becoming a blaze. I straightened in my seat, my voice steady, despite the storm in my chest. And what am I, Vivian, if not family? The question was a pebble dropped into a still pond, its ripples unsettling the carefully curated facade of the evening. Derek's fork paused mid-air, his kind eyes flickering with unease. Vivian's smile tightened her fingers, curling around her wineglass as if to anchor herself. The silence stretched taut and electric until she spoke again, her tone deceptively light. "Oh, Nadia, you're so sensitive. It's just a little oversight. Surely you prefer something lighter anyway." Her words were a sleight of hand meant to dismiss and diminish, but they only fanned the spark within me. I glanced at Margot, whose knowing nod was like a silent incantation, urging me to hold my ground. I could have stayed silent, as I had so many times before swallowing the slights like bitter wine. But tonight was different. Tonight I felt the pull of something deeper, a force that whispered of truths hidden beneath the surface of this opulent charade. "If you're watching this," I said, my voice carrying a quiet power that surprised even me, "know that this moment changed everything. Like and subscribe. Share your own stories of standing against those who would cast you out. Because tonight I stood up to the woman who never saw me as family and uncovered a truth that would unravel her carefully guarded empire." The words felt like a vow, a declaration that echoed beyond the dining hall, as if the very walls were listening. I wasn't just speaking to Vivian or the guests. I was speaking to a future I could barely glimpse, one where I would no longer be invisible. The Harringtons thought they knew me, a speech therapist from a middle-class Boston family, a woman who didn't belong in their world of old money and older grudges. But they didn't know the strength I carried, forged in the crucible of my parents' sacrifices and my own relentless determination. As the servers cleared the plates, Vivian's eyes locked onto mine, a glint of something unreadable flickering in their depths. Was it anger, fear, or something more arcane, as if she sensed the shift in the air, the awakening of a power she couldn't control? I couldn't be sure, but I felt it, a pulse of defiance that thrummed through my veins, as if the very act of questioning her had cracked open a door to something greater. The dinner continued, the guests resuming their conversations as if nothing had happened, but the atmosphere had changed. Whispers followed me soft as shadows, and I caught fragments of words: outsider, unworthy, Julia. That name, Julia Derrick's ex-girlfriend, was a ghost that haunted every interaction with Vivian. I had heard it before, dropped casually in conversations meant to wound, but tonight it carried a weight I couldn't ignore. What secrets did Vivian hold about Julia, and why did her name feel like a key to a lock I hadn't yet found? As dessert was served, individual chocolate soufflés, rising like dark promises from their ramekins. My place remained empty. Not even a mint, not a crumb. Just the bare expanse of the tablecloth staring back at me. The omission was deliberate, a final twist of Vivian's knife, and it ignited something primal within me. I didn't need their food, their approval, or their gilded cage. I had something they couldn't take: my voice, my truth, and a fire that was only beginning to burn. I leaned toward Derek, my whisper sharp enough to cut through his distraction. "Am I family or not?" His eyes met mine, pained and conflicted, but he said nothing, his silence a betrayal louder than words. That was when I knew this dinner wasn't just a test of my place in the Harrington family. It was the opening move in a game I hadn't realized I was playing, one where the stakes were not just my marriage, but a legacy of power control and secrets buried deeper than I could imagine. As the guests savored their soufflés, their laughter ringing hollow in my ears, I felt the spark within me flare into a flame. I was Nadia, daughter of a delivery truck driver and a school secretary, a woman who had built her life brick by brick. I had faced worse than Vivian's cold smiles and calculated slights. And tonight I would begin to unravel the mystery of why she feared me, not just as an outsider, but as a threat to something far greater than her carefully curated table. The night was far from over, and the secrets of the Harrington family were only beginning to surface. I didn't know it then, but that empty plate would lead me to a truth that would shake the foundations of their world and awaken a strength within me that even Vivian couldn't extinguish. The memory of that dinner lingers like a shadow, but to understand how I ended up at Vivian Harrington's table, staring at a wilted salad, while her words cut deeper than any knife, you need to know where I came from, and what brought me to the edge of her world. My name is Nadia, and my story begins not in the glittering halls of the Harringtons' Connecticut mansion, but in the narrow streets of Boston's working-class neighborhoods, where the air smelled of asphalt and dreams were built with calloused hands. I grew up in a modest triple-decker, the kind where the stairs creaked secrets and the walls held the echoes of my parents' sacrifices. My father drove a delivery truck for 30 years, his back bent under the weight of crates and the quiet pride of providing for us. My mother, a secretary at an elementary school, spent her evenings poring over budgets to ensure I had books, clothes, and a shot at a future she never had. They were my first heroes, not because they wielded power or wealth, but because they taught me that strength comes from within a lesson that would later burn brighter than I could have imagined. I was the first in our family to go to college, a feat paid for with scholarships, part-time jobs and loans that clung to me like ghosts. I studied speech therapy, driven by a quiet fire to help children find their voices. Children like the ones I'd seen in my mother's school, struggling to be heard. By the time I was 30, I had built a thriving practice working with kids whose halting words became songs of confidence under my care. My life was simple: a small apartment, a practical car, a circle of friends who knew me as Nadia, not as a pawn in someone else's game. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, forged with grit and a stubborn belief that I could shape my own destiny. That destiny shifted the night I met Derek. It was at a wedding, one of those sprawling affairs, where the bride was a college friend and the groom a distant cousin of someone important. I stood on the edges, nursing a glass of champagne, when I felt a gaze like a whisper across my skin. He was across the reception hall, the best man in a tailored suit, his dark hair catching the light, his eyes kind yet piercing, as if they saw something in me no one else had. When he crossed the room to ask me to dance, the world seemed to tilt, the music weaving a thread between us that felt like fate or something older, something I couldn't name. We danced, and the conversation flowed like a river unbroken, even as the venue staff began stacking chairs around us. Derek was a financial analyst, born into a world of privilege I'd only glimpsed in movies. His father, William, had built an investment empire. His mother, Vivian, descended from a lineage of old money, her name whispered in the same breath as yacht clubs and charity galas. He spoke of private schools and Ivy League halls with a casual ease, but there was a warmth to him, a down-to-earth charm that disarmed me. He made me laugh, a sound I hadn't realized I'd been holding back, and when he kissed me under the starlit canopy, it felt like a promise. Our romance was a whirlwind, 6 months of stolen weekends and late-night calls that blurred the lines between our worlds. When he proposed on a windswept cliff in Cape Cod, the ocean roaring below us, I said yes without hesitation. I believed love could bridge any gap that our differences, his wealth, my struggle, were mere details in the face of what we felt. But there was a shadow in that moment, a chill that wasn't just the sea breeze. As I looked into his eyes, I saw a flicker of something doubt, or perhaps a warning, as if he knew the cost of bringing me into his family's orbit. I should have listened to that chill, but love is a spell, and I was enchanted. My first mistake was underestimating the power of the Harrington legacy, a force as tangible as the mansion they called home. It wasn't just wealth or status. It was something deeper, a current that ran through their bloodline, binding them to traditions and secrets I couldn't yet see. I felt it the moment I stepped into their world at the engagement dinner, where the air was thick with unspoken rules. William greeted me with a polite nod, his silver hair and reserved demeanor, giving him the air of a king who preferred ledgers to crowns. He asked about my work, but his questions felt like formalities, his mind already drifting to market trends. Vivian, however, was a different creature entirely. She glided into the room like a specter, her designer gown whispering against the polished floor, her smile a mask that never reached her eyes. She was beautiful in the way a storm is beautiful, captivating, but dangerous. Her questions came like darts. Where exactly did you grow up? What do your parents do? Which schools did you attend? Each answer seemed to deepen the shadow in her gaze, as if my existence was an affront to some ancient order. Then, there was Julia. Vivian mentioned her name 3 times that night, each reference a calculated strike. Julia and Derek were such a striking pair at the Prescott Gala, she said, sliding her phone across the table to show me a photo of a poised woman with chestnut hair and a smile that matched Derek's. Her family owns a lovely estate in Martha's Vineyard. Such a pity things didn't work out. The words were laced with a sweetness that hid their venom, but I felt the sting. Julia was the ghost of Derek's past, a phantom Vivian summoned to remind me I was an interloper. Derek, ever the optimist, brushed off his mother's behavior. "She's just protective," he said later, his hand warm on mine as we drove back to my apartment. "She wants to make sure I'm happy. Give her time, Nadia. She'll come around." His words were earnest, but there was a tremor in them, a hint that he knew more than he let on. I wanted to believe him, to trust that love could soften even Vivian's edges, but a part of me, a quiet, instinctual part, sensed the truth. Vivian wasn't just protective. She was guarding something, a secret, or a power that my presence threatened to disrupt. That instinct grew stronger in the months that followed. I began to notice patterns subtle but undeniable. Invitations to family events arrived late, if at all. My attempts to connect gifts of hand-picked flowers, offers to assist with Vivian's charity auctions, were met with polite dismissals or outright ignored. Once I found a crystal vase I'd given her for her birthday, still in its box, tucked away in a guest room closet, as if it were a forgotten relic. Derek's siblings, Elaine and Michael, were cordial, but distant, their warmth tempered by Vivian's influence. Elaine's compliments on my earrings carried a competitive edge, while Michael and his wife Stephanie kept me at arm's length, as if I were a puzzle they weren't sure how to solve. Only Aunt Margot, my mother's sister, saw through the facade. She lived in Connecticut, close enough to witness the Harringtons' dynamics firsthand. Over coffee in her cozy kitchen, she'd warn me with a knowing smile. "Vivian's not just a snob, Nadia. There's something she's hiding, something she thinks you might uncover. Watch her closely." Her words were cryptic, but they stirred that same spark I'd felt at the dinner, a sense that I was on the cusp of something larger than myself. Margot was my anchor, the one who reminded me of the strength I'd inherited from my parents. She told me stories of my mother's resilience, of how she'd faced her own battles with grace and grit. "You have that same fire," Margot said, her eyes gleaming with pride. "Don't let Vivian extinguish it." Her words were a talisman, a reminder that I wasn't just fighting for a place at the Harrington table. I was fighting for myself, for the woman I'd become, and the truths I was destined to uncover. As the invitation to William's retirement dinner arrived, embossed with gold and promising a 7-course meal, I felt a mix of hope and dread. The event was to be a grand affair, a celebration of William's legacy and Vivian's meticulous control. Margot was invited too, a rare inclusion that Vivian tolerated only because of William's insistence. "This is a big night," Derek told me, his voice tinged with both excitement and caution. "Mom's been planning it for months. The whole family will be there." I nodded, choosing a black dress that felt like armor, its simplicity a quiet defiance against Vivian's opulence. But as I prepared, I couldn't shake the feeling that this dinner was more than a celebration. It was a stage, and I was about to step into a performance where the script was written in secrets. What did Vivian fear I might discover? Why did Julia's name linger like a curse? And what power did I possess that made me a threat in her eyes? The October night was crisp, the stars above the Harrington mansion sharp as daggers. As Derek and I approached the grand entrance, the house loomed like a fortress, its windows glowing with a warmth that felt like a lie. I squeezed Derek's hand, drawing strength from the love we'd built, but the chill from that Cape Cod cliff returned whispering that this night would change everything. I didn't know it then, but I was walking into a game of shadows where every gesture hid a motive, and my place at the table would ignite a battle for truths long buried. The Harringtons' world was a labyrinth of polished surfaces and hidden thorns, and I was learning its paths the hard way. Each step I took into their gilded domain felt like a test, as if Vivian with her serpent smile was watching for the moment I'd falter. I was Nadia, the speech therapist from Boston's working-class streets, now tethered to a family whose wealth was matched only by their secrets. After that first engagement dinner, where Vivian's questions had sliced through my defenses, I began to sense a deeper game at play, one where I was not just an outsider, but a threat to something she guarded with a ferocity I couldn't yet comprehend. The engagement dinner had been a prelude, a warning carved in crystal and candlelight. Vivian sat at the head of the table, her designer gown catching the light like a dark mirror, her eyes assessing me as if I were a puzzle she intended to dismantle. "Tell me, Nadia," she'd said, her voice smooth as silk. "Where exactly did you grow up? I don't believe I've heard of that part of Boston." Her tone carried a faint disdain, as if my childhood streets were a stain she could scrub away. My answers about my parents' modest jobs, my hard-won degree, seemed to deepen the chill in her gaze. She'd nod, her lips curving, but there was no warmth, only a calculation that made my skin prickle. Then came Julia's name, dropped like a stone into still water. Julia was so poised at the Prescott Charity Gala, Vivian mused, her fingers brushing the screen of her phone as she showed me a photo. The woman in the image was elegant, her smile a perfect match for Derek's, her background a tapestry of wealth and privilege. Her father's a hospital director, you know. Such a well-connected family. The words were a blade, and Vivian wielded them with precision, each mention of Julia, a reminder that I was not the daughter-in-law she'd envisioned. I glanced at Derek, hoping for a defense, but he only squeezed my hand under the table, his smile tight. "Mom's just nostalgic," he whispered later. "She'll warm up to you." But she didn't. If anything, Vivian's frost grew sharper with time, her slights more deliberate, as if she were weaving a spell to keep me at bay. Family gatherings became a battlefield of subtle exclusions. Invitations arrived late or not at all, addressed only to Derek, as if my presence were an afterthought. When I offered to help with Vivian's charity events, she'd decline with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "The committee is already set, dear," she'd say, her tone implying I lacked the pedigree to belong. The crystal vase I gave her for her birthday, a gift I'd saved for weeks to afford, never saw the light of day, relegated to a dusty closet like a forgotten relic. Each rejection was a thread in the web she spun, designed to remind me I was an interloper in her world. Derek's siblings were no better, their behavior a mirror of Vivian's influence. Elaine, his sister, was a study in contradictions. She'd compliment my earrings with a bright smile, only to pivot to tales of her own accomplishments, a new promotion, a weekend in Paris, as if to underscore my inadequacy. Her words carried a competitive edge, sharp enough to draw blood if I let them. Michael, Derek's brother, and his wife, Stephanie, kept a polite distance, their conversations with me clipped and formal. I later learned Stephanie had faced her own trials when she joined the family, her acceptance hard-won, only after she molded herself to Vivian's standards, joining William's firm and adopting their lifestyle. They followed Vivian's lead, treating me as an outsider, to be tolerated, not embraced. Yet there was one ally in this gilded cage, Aunt Margot, my mother's sister, who lived just close enough to the Harringtons' Connecticut enclave to see their games for what they were. Margot was a force of nature, her silver hair and sharp wit, a quiet rebellion against Vivian's control. Over tea in her cozy cottage, she'd watch me with eyes that seemed to see beyond the present, as if she sensed the same undercurrent I did. Vivian's not just protecting her family, she said one afternoon, her voice low, as if the walls might overhear. She's guarding something else, something old, something tied to the Harrington name. You're a threat to it, Nadia, whether you know it or not. Her words sent a shiver through me, stirring that spark I'd felt at the engagement dinner, a spark that felt less like defiance and more like a dormant power awakening. What could I possibly threaten? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Margot leaned closer, her gaze intense. You're not like them. You see through their facades, and that scares her. There's a strength in you, Nadia, one they can't control. Keep your eyes open. Her warning was cryptic, but it lodged in my mind like a seed growing with each slight, each dismissal. I tried to win Vivian's approval, not because I craved her acceptance, but because I loved Derek and wanted to believe we could build a life together. I brought thoughtful gifts to family gatherings, books on art for Vivian's collection, a scarf for Elaine, only to see them ignored or set aside. I researched topics Vivian cared about, from philanthropy to rare orchids, hoping to find common ground. But every effort was met with a wall of indifference, as if my presence were a crack in the perfect facade she'd built. Once I overheard her speaking to Elaine in a hushed tone at a garden party. She tries so hard, doesn't she? It's almost pitiful. The words were a dagger, but they only fueled the fire within me. Derek, bless his heart, saw none of it, or chose not to. He adored his mother, blinded by her polished exterior and the love he'd always known. When I mentioned her behavior, he'd deflect with a smile. Mom's just particular, he'd say. She means well. Give her time. But time only sharpened Vivian's edges, and I began to wonder if Derek's blindness was willful, a refusal to see the truth of his family's dynamics. There were moments, fleeting glances, hesitations in his voice that made me question what he knew, what he wasn't telling me. Was he protecting me, or protecting something else? The mystery deepened with every encounter. At a family brunch, I noticed a locked door in the Harrington mansion, its ornate handle engraved with symbols I couldn't decipher. When I asked Derek about it, he brushed it off. Just storage, he said, but his eyes darted away, and I felt that chill again, the same one from our engagement night. What lay behind that door, and why did Vivian watch me so closely whenever I lingered near it? The questions gnawed at me, each one a piece of a puzzle I was only beginning to assemble. Margot's presence was my lifeline through it all. She attended family events when she could her college friendship with William, granting her a reluctant place at Vivian's table. William's the only reason I'm tolerated, she told me, with a wry smile. Vivian hates that we're still close, but she can't control him entirely. Her words hinted at a history I didn't fully understand, a connection between her and William that Vivian resented. It was Margot who taught me to navigate the Harringtons' world not by conforming, but by holding fast to my own strength. You don't need their approval, she said, her voice firm. You have something they'll never understand, a fire they can't extinguish. That fire was tested as the invitation to William's retirement dinner arrived, its embossed card, a summons to another battlefield. The event promised black-tie elegance, a 7-course meal crafted by a renowned chef, and the presence of the entire Harrington clan. Margot was invited too, a rare gesture that gave me a flicker of hope. But as I prepared choosing a dress that felt like both armor and defiance, I couldn't shake the sense that this dinner was more than a celebration. It was a stage for Vivian's next move, a chance to tighten her web, or perhaps to reveal what she feared I might uncover. I stood before my mirror, the black silk of my dress, catching the light and felt that spark flare brighter. It was no longer just defiance. It was a knowing, a certainty that I was more than the Harringtons' outsider. There was a power in me, one I didn't fully understand but could feel pulsing in my veins, whispering of truths hidden in locked doors and veiled glances. Vivian thought she could control me, diminish me, but she didn't know the strength I carried, forged in the crucible of my parents' sacrifices and my own relentless will. As Derek and I drove toward the mansion, the October night closing around us like a velvet curtain, I felt the weight of what lay ahead. This dinner wasn't just a test of my place in the family, it was the opening of a door to secrets I was destined to unravel. Vivian's cold treatment was not just cruelty, it was fear, and I was beginning to understand why. I was Nadia, and I was ready to face the shadows to claim my place, not just at the table, but in a story far greater than I'd ever imagined. The night of William Harrington's retirement dinner loomed like a storm on the horizon, its promise of elegance masking a current of danger I could feel, but not yet name. The invitation had arrived in an embossed envelope, its gold lettering a summons to a battlefield disguised as a celebration. As I stood before my mirror, smoothing the black silk dress I'd saved 3 months to afford, I felt like a warrior donning armor. The fabric clung to me, not just a garment, but a shield against the Harringtons' world, a world where every smile hid a blade, and every gesture carried a secret. I was Nadia, the woman who'd fought her way from Boston's working-class streets to stand at the edge of their empire, and tonight I sensed would be the crucible where my strength would be tested. Derek drove us through the October dusk, the headlights of our Audi cutting through the chill air. The Harrington mansion rose before us, a colonial fortress aglow with tasteful lighting that illuminated its manicured gardens and stone facade. It was beautiful, like something from a painting, but its grandeur felt like a lure drawing me into a trap I couldn't yet see. "You look beautiful," Derek said, squeezing my hand as we approached the imposing front door. His voice was warm, but there was a tightness in it, a shadow of unease that mirrored my own. I squeezed back, drawing strength from our love, but the spark within me, that ember of defiance, flared brighter, whispering that tonight was no ordinary dinner. Vivian greeted us herself, bypassing the staff who took coats and murmured directions. She enveloped Derek in a warm embrace, her voice bright as she exclaimed over his tuxedo. "So handsome, darling," she said, her eyes softening in a way they never did for me. When she turned to me, her smile cooled a perfunctory air kiss, grazing the air near my cheek. "Nadia, you made it," she said, her tone implying my presence was a surprise, an inconvenience. She made no comment on my appearance, turning swiftly to welcome the guests behind us. The dismissal was deliberate, a thread in the web she wove to keep me at the fringes. The grand foyer opened into a series of opulent rooms, each filled with the hum of 40 guests in black tie attire. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow, and servers in crisp uniforms glided through the crowd with trays of champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres. A string quartet played in the corner, its notes weaving a spell of elegance that felt both enchanting and oppressive. I recognized faces from past gatherings, William's brother, Derek's cousins, from Boston partners from the firm, but their smiles were fleeting, their eyes sliding past me as if I were a ghost. The family photographs lining the walls told a story of exclusion, professional portraits of Derek and his siblings, candids from lavish vacations, images of William and Vivian at galas. I searched for our wedding photo, a moment of joy I'd thought would anchor me here, but found none. The absence was a silent message, one I felt in my bones. Derek led me through the rooms, his hand warm, but his attention divided pulled into conversations with relatives and colleagues. "Derek, come here, son." William called from across the salon, his voice cutting through the chatter. Derek squeezed my hand apologetically before joining his father and a group of silver-haired men, their talk of firm transitions a world apart from mine. Left alone, I drifted toward the dining room, drawn by the sight of the long mahogany table set for 23. The place settings were a work of art, fine china crystal stemware, silver flatware arranged with precision, but something about them felt wrong, like a puzzle with a missing piece. "Quite the production, isn't it?" a familiar voice said behind me. I turned to find Aunt Margot radiant in a deep blue gown, her silver hair a defiant contrast to the room's muted tones. Relief flooded me at the sight of her, my one true ally in this den of shadows. "Margot," I said, embracing her, "I didn't know you'd be here." She winked her eyes, gleaming with a knowing light. "William and I go way back. College friends. Vivian tolerates me because he insists, but she'd rather I vanish." Her words carried a weight, hinting at a history that prickled my curiosity. What had Margot and William shared, and why did Vivian resent it so fiercely? As we chatted, a server approached with a tray of champagne flutes. He offered one to Margot, then moved to pass me, by his eyes averted. "May I have one, please?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. He hesitated, glancing toward Vivian, who stood across the room, her lips pressed into a thin line. He nodded, allowing me to take a glass, but the interaction felt like a violation, as if I'd had to beg for what others were freely given. "Don't let her get to you," Margot whispered, her gaze following mine to Vivian. "She wants you to feel small. It's how she controls." The next hour was a parade of subtle slights, each one a thread in Vivian's web. Servers overlooked me when offering canapes, their trays gliding past as if I were invisible. When Elaine showed off a new diamond bracelet, Vivian praised its breeding and taste, her eyes flicking to my modest jewelry with a smirk. She circulated the room, refilling wine glasses with a gracious smile, pausing to chat with each guest except me. When she reached Margot and me, she topped off Margot's glass, asking about her recent trip to France, then turned away, without a word to me. As she did, her elbow brushed my arm, spilling red wine onto my dress. "Oh dear," she said, her voice devoid of concern. "You should clean that up." "Powder room's down the hall, second door." I retreated to the bathroom, dabbing at the stain with a damp towel, my hands trembling with suppressed anger. Through the vent, I heard voices from an adjacent room, Vivian's study, I realized. "She's trying so hard," Vivian said, her tone dripping with disdain. "That dress is off the rack, and those shoes with that handbag painful to watch." Elaine's laugh followed, light but cruel. "Derek seems happy, though." Vivian's reply was a blade. "For now. Julia called last week, you know. Still single. I've always believed they'd find their way back to each other." The words froze me. The towel pressed against my dress. Julia, Derek's ex, the ghost, Vivian summoned at every opportunity. I'd known they'd dated for 3 years, that their breakup was mutual, but this was something else. Vivian was orchestrating something, a plan that hinged on Julia's return. Was Derek part of it? The thought was a splinter in my heart, but it also sharpened my resolve. That spark within me flared a fire that refused to be doused by Vivian's schemes. When I returned to the party, Derek was deep in conversation with his father, barely noticing my presence. The strain of maintaining a smile while feeling like an intruder was exhausting, but I clung to Margot's words, to the strength I'd built from years of proving myself. The dining room was announced, and guests moved to find their seats. I scanned the table for my place card, my name in elegant calligraphy, but found nothing. Derek. I whispered, "There's no card for me." He frowned, surprised, then shrugged. An oversight. "Sit here between me and Margot." He pulled up a chair, its lack of a charger plate or crystal glasses, a stark contrast to the others' settings. Vivian noticed immediately, her voice tight. Derek, the seating, was arranged specifically. He waved her off. "It's fine, Mom. Nadia's here." But it wasn't fine. As the first course, a lobster bisque with truffle oil, was served, every guest received a steaming bowl except me. The servers moved past my empty place, their eyes avoiding mine. Margot's fork clinked against her plate. "Excuse me," she said to a passing server, "my niece didn't receive her course." The server glanced at Vivian, who smiled placidly. "We're one setting short," she said. The chef prepared exactly enough for the invited guests. "Perhaps Nadia can share with Derek." The implication was clear. I wasn't invited, not truly. I was a guest in name, only tolerated because of Derek's insistence. He frowned, pushing his bowl toward me. "We can share," he said, but his attention returned to his brother, oblivious to the weight of the moment. I took a spoonful of bisque, my appetite gone, replaced by a growing certainty that Vivian's actions were not just cruelty, but a calculated move in a larger game. The second course, scallops with beurre blanc, followed the same pattern. Everyone received a plate except me. I didn't bother pointing it out, and Derek, absorbed in a discussion about business schools, offered me a scallop without looking. By the third course, a palate-cleansing sorbet, the guests' glances toward my empty place grew uncomfortable, though none spoke up. William looked confused but said nothing, deferring to Vivian as always. Then came the main course, prime ribeye steaks, their aroma filling the room, each plate tailored to the guest's preference. When the server reached me, he placed a plain garden salad before me, its simplicity a mockery of the feast around me. Margot's fork hit her plate with a sharp clink. "Vivian, why does Nadia have a salad when everyone else has steak?" The table fell silent, conversations halting as eyes turned to us. Vivian's smile was a mask, her eyes hard. "I only ordered for family," she said, her voice sweet but venomous. "The steaks were flown in from Japan, quite expensive. I'm sure Nadia prefers something lighter." The silence was deafening, a void that swallowed the room. I felt every gaze waiting for my reaction, but the spark within me was no longer just a spark. It was a flame, burning with a clarity I'd never known. Vivian's words were not just an insult. They were a declaration of war, a signal that I threatened something she held dear. But what the locked door I'd seen the symbols etched into its handle flashed in my mind. Was it tied to Julia, to the Harrington legacy, to a secret Vivian feared I'd uncover? I met her gaze, my voice steady, despite the storm in my chest. "If I'm not family, Vivian, then what am I doing here?" The question hung in the air, a challenge that shifted the room's energy. Derek's hand froze on his knife, his eyes on his plate. The guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing the fault lines beneath the evening's facade. Vivian's smile faltered just for a moment, and in that flicker, I saw something, fear perhaps, or the recognition of a power she couldn't control. The dessert course arrived, individual chocolate soufflés, rising like dark omens. My place remained empty, not even a mint to mark my presence. Derek, absorbed in his dessert, didn't notice, didn't offer to share. The exclusion was complete, a final act in Vivian's performance. But as I sat there surrounded by wealth and indifference, I felt the flame within me grow stronger. I was Nadia, daughter of survivors, bearer of a strength I was only beginning to understand. This dinner was not the end. It was the beginning of a reckoning, one that would unravel the secrets Vivian guarded and reveal the power I carried within. The dining room was a cathedral of opulence, Its mahogany table a stage where Vivian Harrington held court her every gesture, a calculated act in a play I was only beginning to understand. The chandelier above cast fractured light across the faces of 23 guests, their murmurs fading as Vivian's words I only ordered for family hung in the air like a curse. My plain salad sat before me, a stark insult against the sizzling steaks savored by the others. But it was her declaration that ignited the flame within me. I was Nadia forged in the crucible of my parents' sacrifices, and tonight that flame would burn through the shadows of her carefully crafted world. The silence that followed her words was a living thing heavy and expectant as every eye turned to me. I felt their gazes like weights, some curious, some uncomfortable, but none daring to challenge the queen of this gilded domain. Derek sat beside me, his knife poised over his steak, his eyes fixed on his plate, as if it held the answers to the tension coiling around us. Aunt Margot across the table gave me a nod, her silver hair catching the candlelight like a beacon. Her presence was a reminder of the strength I carried, a strength Vivian underestimated at her peril. I leaned toward Derek, my voice a whisper sharp enough to cut through his distraction. Am I family or not? His eyes met mine, pained and conflicted, but he said nothing, his silence a betrayal that pierced deeper than Vivian's words. The spark within me, that ember I'd felt since the engagement dinner, flared into a blaze. 2 years of slights, of pretending not to notice the 1,000 cuts to my dignity, crashed over me like a wave. I'd endured Vivian's passive aggression for Derek's sake, believing love could bridge the chasm between our worlds. But tonight, with a wilted salad as my only offering, I realized that love alone wasn't enough, not without respect, not without a fight. The dessert course arrived individual chocolate soufflés rising like dark omens from their ramekins. The guests murmured their approval spoons clinking against porcelain, but my place remained empty, not even a mint to mark my presence. Derek, absorbed in his dessert, didn't offer to share, didn't even glance my way. The exclusion was complete, a final act in Vivian's performance to cast me out. But as I watched her smile, her eyes glinting with triumph, I felt something shift within me. It wasn't just anger. It was power, a force that pulsed through my veins, whispering of truths hidden behind locked doors and veiled glances. Vivian thought she could diminish me, but she didn't know the fire I carried, a fire that was about to burn her web to ashes. Margot's hand found mine under the table, a silent gesture of support that anchored me. I took a deep breath, my heart racing, but my voice steady, and stood. The movement was deliberate, a signal that the rules of this game were about to change. Actually, I said my words, cutting through the chatter like a blade I'd like to address something. The room fell silent, conversations halting as forks paused mid-air. Derek tensed beside me, his whisper urgent. Nadia, not now, but I ignored him. My gaze locked on Vivian at the head of the table. Her smile remained fixed, but her knuckles whitened around her dessert spoon, a crack in her poised facade. For 2 years, I began my voice carrying a quiet power that surprised even me. I've tried to be part of this family. I've overlooked the slights, excused the accidental exclusions, and accepted being treated as less than. But tonight has made something very clear, something I can no longer ignore. Vivian's eyes narrowed, a flicker of something fear perhaps passing through them. I'm not sure what you mean, dear, she said, her tone dripping with condescension. This is hardly the time for whatever grievance you've invented. The word invented was a spark to my flame, and I seized it. Invented, I repeated, my voice steady, despite the storm in my chest. Let me be specific then. Tonight I was the only one without a place card, the only one servers overlooked for drinks and appetizers. The only one served a plain salad, while everyone else enjoyed steak flown in from Japan. And now, no dessert, not even a crumb. I let my words settle, meeting the eyes of each guest around the table. Some looked away uncomfortable. Others seemed surprised, as if they hadn't noticed the pattern until I named it. But this isn't just about tonight. I continued, my voice growing stronger, fueled by the fire within. It's about the Christmas gift exchange, where everyone received a present except me, because I wasn't on the family list. It's about the family vacation photos, where I was asked to step aside for just the family. It's about our wedding picture, the only one missing from your photo wall, Vivian. William frowned, his silver hair catching the light as he leaned forward. Vivian, is this true? His voice was quiet, but there was a weight to it, a stirring of something long dormant. Before Vivian could respond, Margot spoke, her tone sharp and unyielding. It's all true, William. I've seen it myself, time and again. The air grew thicker, the chandelier's light seeming to dim, as if the room itself were holding its breath. Vivian's smile tightened, her voice rising slightly. This is ridiculous. Nadia has always been overly sensitive. We've done nothing but welcome her into our home. The lie was brazen, and it fanned my flame higher. Welcome me, I echoed, my voice cutting through her facade. You've systematically excluded me from day one. You compare me to Julia at every turn, dismiss my career, my background, everything that makes me who I am. You've made it clear I don't belong, and tonight you've made it public. Derek finally spoke, his voice low and strained. Nadia, you're embarrassing yourself and my family. This is my father's retirement dinner. His words were a dagger sharper than Vivian's, because they came from the man I loved, your family. I repeated, my voice trembling with emotion, but not breaking. After 2 years of marriage, I'm still not part of your family in your mind. The guests shifted uncomfortably, their silence a canvas for the truth I was painting. I reached into my purse, my fingers brushing the cool surface of my phone. 3 weeks ago, I said, my voice steady again. You and your mother exchanged texts about me. Would you like me to read them? Derek's face drained of color, his fork clattering against his plate. You went through my phone, he asked, his voice a mix of shock and guilt. I didn't have to, I said, holding his gaze. You left it open on the nightstand. The notification from Mom caught my eye. I pulled up the screenshot, my hands steady, despite the tremor in my heart. Your mother wrote, Nadia looked completely out of place at the club fundraiser. Could you not have helped her select appropriate attire? Julia always understood these events. And you replied, I know, Mom. Sometimes I wonder if she'll ever fit in with us. Gasps rippled around the table, soft but unmistakable. Elaine stared at her plate, her usual confidence faltering. Michael and Stephanie exchanged glances, their discomfort palpable. You never defended me, I said to Derek, my voice cracking with the weight of 2 years' worth of hurt. Not once have you stood up to your mother when she belittled me. The flame within me burned brighter, a power that felt almost tangible, as if the room itself were responding to my truth. How dare you? Vivian hissed, her poised facade crumbling. Derek has given you a life you could never have achieved, a nobody from a nothing family, and this is your gratitude. Her words were venom, but they only fueled my fire. Elaine gasped, shocked at her mother's naked hostility. William stood, his napkin falling to the floor. Vivian, that's enough, he said, his voice firm, a rare crack in his usual deference. No, William, it's not enough. Vivian snapped, her eyes blazing. She's never been good enough for our son, and everyone here knows it. I've only had the courage to say it. The room froze, her ultimatum a thunderclap. Choose, Derek. She demanded, her voice cold as steel. Your family or her. The silence that followed was absolute, a void that swallowed every sound. 23 pairs of eyes turned to Derek, waiting for his choice. I held my breath, a part of me still clinging to the hope that he'd stand by me, that our love could withstand this storm. But as he looked from his mother to me, then down at his half-eaten soufflé, his silence was answer enough. The flame within me roared, not with anger, but with clarity. I didn't need his validation, not anymore. I had my own power, one Vivian feared, and Derek couldn't see. I stood slowly, placing my napkin beside my empty plate. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady for making this so clear. I turned to Vivian, meeting her gaze with a strength that felt ancient, as if it had been waiting for this moment. "I won't stay where I'm not wanted or respected." The words were a spell breaking the chains of her control, and as I spoke, I felt that locked door in the mansion. The one with the strange symbols pulse in my mind, as if it were calling to me. I walked out of the dining room, my steps deliberate, my head high. No one called after me, not even Derek. The foyer was a blur of crystal and shadows, the staff member handing me my coat with a confused glance. I stepped into the October night, the air sharp against my skin, but I refused to let tears fall. Not here, not on Vivian's ground. The stars above were bright, their light a reminder of the fire within me. A fire that was no longer just defiance, but something more. Something I was only beginning to understand. Footsteps crunched behind me, and I tensed, hoping against hope it was Derek. But it was Margot, her blue gown shimmering in the moonlight. "Nadia, wait." She called, her voice soft but firm. "I need to go," I said, fumbling with my car keys, my hands shaking with the weight of what I'd done. "I know, sweetheart," she said, her eyes searching mine. "But you shouldn't drive upset. Let me take you home." "I can manage," I insisted, though my vision blurred with unshed tears. "Then I'll follow you," Margot said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "And Nadia, I'm proud of you. What you did in there, it took courage. You've shaken something loose, something Vivian's been hiding for years." Her words were cryptic, but they resonated with the pulse in my veins, the sense that my confrontation had cracked open a door to truths I was destined to uncover. As I drove away, Margot's headlights steady behind me, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The mansion receded, its glow fading, but there was no sign of Derek in the driveway. His absence was a final blow, but it also freed me. The flame within me burned brighter, whispering of locked doors and hidden legacies of a power I carried that Vivian feared. Tonight I'd stood up to her, and in doing so, I'd begun to unravel the mystery of the Harringtons, a mystery that would lead me to a truth far greater than I'd ever imagined. The October night wrapped around me like a cloak as I drove away from the Harrington mansion, Margot's headlights, a steady beacon in my rearview mirror. The stars above were sharp, their light cutting through the darkness, but they offered no comfort. My hands gripped the steering wheel, trembling not with fear, but with the aftershock of what I'd done. I was Nadia, the woman who'd stood up to Vivian Harrington in her own cathedral of power, and though I'd walked away with my head high, the weight of Derek's silence pressed against my chest like a stone. The flame within me, that pulsing fire I'd felt during the confrontation, burned still, but it was tempered by a raw, aching hurt, a wound that whispered of betrayal and secrets yet to be uncovered. I arrived at my apartment building, the doorman's familiar smile, a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. In the elevator, I leaned against the wall, exhaustion seeping into my bones. Margot stood beside me, her presence a quiet anchor. "Do you want me to come up?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. I shook my head, the words catching in my throat. "I need to be alone, but thank you, Margot, for everything." She hugged me tightly, her embrace a reminder of the strength I carried. "Call me any time, day or night." She set her eyes searching mine. And Nadia, what you did tonight, it wasn't just courage. It was a spark that's going to light up something bigger. Trust that. Her words lingered cryptic and heavy as the elevator doors opened to my floor. Alone in our apartment, the silence was deafening. Photos of Derek and me smiling on beaches, laughing at our wedding, lined the walls, mocking the hope we'd once shared. Our wedding portrait, the one Vivian had never displayed, hung above the fireplace, its joy a distant memory. I sank to the floor, my back against the door, and let the tears come. They were not tears of defeat, but of release, a torrent of hurt, humiliation, and betrayal that left me gasping. The flame within me flickered, but it did not go out. It was as if it were waiting, gathering strength for what lay ahead. My phone buzzed relentlessly, Derek's name flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, unable to face his voice. When I finally listened, his messages were a storm of anger, not apology. How could you embarrass my family like that? He demanded, his tone sharp. On my father's retirement night, Nadia, you need to call my mother and apologize now. The unfairness of his words unleashed a fresh wave of tears, but they also sharpened my resolve. In what world was I the one who owed an apology? Vivian had orchestrated my exclusion, and Derek had stood by, complicit in his silence. Around midnight, I heard his key in the lock. I'd moved to the bedroom by then, sitting on our bed with a suitcase half-packed, my hands steady, despite the ache in my heart. Derek stormed in, his usually impeccable appearance, disheveled, his eyes dark with frustration. "What are you doing?" he demanded, seeing the suitcase. "Packing," I said simply. "I'm going to stay with Margot for a while." "Don't be dramatic," he scoffed, pacing the room. "Running away won't solve anything." His words stung, but they also clarified something I'd been avoiding. "I'm not running away," I said, my voice calm but unyielding. "I'm removing myself from a situation where I'm not respected or valued." He stopped pacing, running a hand through his hair. "You humiliated my mother in front of our entire family. What did you expect would happen?" "What did I expect?" I repeated, incredulous. "I expected my husband to defend me when his mother deliberately excluded and insulted me. I expected to be treated with basic decency at a family dinner. She served me a salad Derek while everyone else got steak. She gave me nothing for dessert. How can you defend that?" The flame within me flared its heat, a reminder of the power I'd claimed at that table. "You're exaggerating," he said, dismissing me as he always had. "Mom's particular about her events. You know that." I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the quiet room. "Particular. She's been systematically pushing me out for 2 years, and you've let her. Every time I've tried to talk to you about it, you brush it off. When has that ever changed anything?" He sat heavily on the bed, his shoulders slumping. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Dad's retiring, the firm's transitioning, and Mom, she's always done things her way." His words were a plea, but they rang hollow. "Her way," I said flatly, "is to humiliate your wife. And you've let it happen." The flame pulsed stronger now, as if it were feeding on my truth. "Try harder, Nadia," he said, his voice desperate. "If you just fit in." The words snapped something inside me. "Try harder," I said, zipping the suitcase with finality. "I've done nothing but try. I've changed how I dress, how I speak, what I talk about. I've attended every family function, joined committees, donated to charities I can't afford. What more could I do?" I moved toward the door, but Derek blocked my path. His eyes pleading. "If you leave now, you're choosing this conflict over our marriage." "No, Derek," I said, my voice steady as the flame roared within. "You made that choice when you sat silently while your mother treated me like nothing. When you texted her agreeing I didn't fit in. When you demanded I apologize instead of acknowledging my pain." I pushed past him, the suitcase heavy in my hand, but his next words stopped me cold. She warned me, you know. Mom said you'd never fit into our world, that you'd show your true colors eventually. I turned to face him, the flame within me blazing with a clarity that felt almost otherworldly. And she warned me too in her way. At our engagement dinner, she said your relationship with Julia ended because she didn't support your career. But that was a lie, wasn't it? It ended because Julia got tired of your mother's treatment and your failure to stand up to her. Derek's shocked expression confirmed my suspicion. How did you know that, he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't, I said, until now. But it makes sense. Has Vivian been in contact with Julia recently? His silence was damning, a confirmation of the web Vivian had been weaving. Goodbye, Derek. I said, my voice soft, but final. I walked out the door, closing behind me with a quiet click, but in my mind it was the sound of a lock turning, sealing away a life that no longer fit. At Margot's cottage, I collapsed onto her couch, the weight of the night pressing down on me. She made tea, her movements calm, but deliberate, as if she sensed the storm within me. What happens now? She asked, sitting beside me, her eyes searching mine. I don't know, I admitted, my voice raw. Part of me wants to fight for my marriage, but a larger part wonders if there's anything left worth fighting for. The flame flickered, but Margot's presence steadied it, her quiet strength a mirror to my own. You've started something, she said, her voice low, as if the walls might listen. Vivian's not just fighting you, she's fighting what you represent. There's something in the Harrington family, something old and hidden, and your strength threatens it. Her words stirred that same pulse I'd felt at the dinner, the image of the locked door in the mansion flashing in my mind. What secrets lay behind it? And why did Vivian fear me so? The days that followed were a blur of pain and clarity. Derek's calls and texts alternated between demands that I return and half-hearted apologies that never addressed the truth. I kept my responses brief, needing space to understand the fire within me, the power that seemed to grow with every moment of defiance. Then came the unexpected allies' voices, breaking through the silence of my isolation. Michael, Derek's brother, called me one evening, his voice awkward but sincere. Nadia, Stephanie, and I support you, he said. What happened at that dinner was wrong. Mom's always been difficult, but this was cruel. His words were a lifeline, a crack in the Harrington facade. Later, Stephanie texted, when I married Michael, Vivian treated me similarly, not as bad, but the same pattern. It took years and joining the firm for her to accept me. You're not alone, Nadia. Her message was a revelation, a hint that Vivian's control was a pattern, not an accident. Elaine's visit was the most surprising. She appeared at Margot's door, unannounced, her usual poise replaced by a nervous energy. I should have said something that night, she admitted, her eyes downcast. I've watched Mom treat you poorly for 2 years and stayed silent. I was afraid of becoming her next target. I studied her, searching for sincerity. Has she always been like this? I asked. Elaine nodded. With anyone she sees as a threat to her control. Dad's enabled it for years. Michael and I learned to navigate it, but Derek, he's her favorite. So he's never had to. The most unexpected call came from William himself. Nadia, this is William. He said, his voice formal, but tinged with regret. I owe you an apology. I didn't realize the extent of, well, I should have been more observant. I consider you family regardless of how poorly that was shown. His words were a balm, but they also raised questions. Why had he stayed silent for so long? And what did he know about the locked door? The symbols? The secrets Vivian guarded? Then came Vivian's next move. A certified letter from her lawyer, accusing me of borrowing and failing to return jewelry from her home. It was a lie, a blatant attempt to intimidate, but it only strengthened my resolve. The flame within me burned brighter, whispering that this was no ordinary power struggle. I called Lauren, a colleague and friend, and poured out the story. She listened without interruption, her voice calm but firm when she spoke. Nadia, this is a toxic family system. Derek's enmeshed with his mother, conditioned to prioritize her approval. You need to protect yourself. Document everything and consider speaking to a divorce attorney, even if just to know your options. The word divorce hit like a physical blow, but it also clarified the path ahead. I wasn't ready to give up, but I needed to understand my strength to uncover the truth behind Vivian's fear. 2 days later, I met with a family law attorney, her office a quiet sanctuary from the storm. She reviewed my situation, outlining the steps for separation or divorce, but it was her final words that stayed with me. Knowledge is power, Nadia. Whatever you choose, you're not powerless. As I left her office, the flame within me pulsed a reminder that I was no longer the woman who'd sat silently at Vivian's table. That evening, Derek called again, his voice subdued. Can we meet? Just to talk neutral ground. I hesitated, the flame flickering with both hope and caution. The coffee shop near Margot's, I said. Tomorrow at 10. As I hung up, I felt the weight of the unknown, but also the certainty of my own power. The locked door, the symbols Vivian's fear they were pieces of a puzzle I was destined to solve. I was Nadia, and I was no longer invisible. Whatever lay ahead, I would face it with the fire that burned within a fire that would light the way to truths hidden in the shadows. The morning after I agreed to meet Derek was gray and heavy. The sky over Margot's Connecticut cottage draped in clouds that seemed to mirror the storm within me. I stood at the window clutching a mug of chamomile tea, its steam curling like a whisper of the flame that burned steadily in my chest. I was Nadia, the woman who'd walked away from Vivian Harrington's gilded cage, my dignity intact, but my heart bruised by Derek's silence. The confrontation at the retirement dinner had cracked open something in me, a power I didn't fully understand tied to the locked door in the mansion, and the secrets Vivian guarded with such ferocity. As I prepared to face Derek at the coffee shop, I felt the weight of that power, a pulse that urged me to seek answers, not just for my marriage, but for the truth lurking in the shadows of the Harrington legacy. The coffee shop was a small haven on a quiet street, its windows fogged with warmth against the October chill. I chose a corner table, the scent of roasted beans and cinnamon grounding me as I waited. My black sweater and jeans felt like a return to myself, a rejection of the polished facade I'd worn to please Vivian. Margot had offered to come, her eyes sharp with concern, but I declined. This is something I need to do. Alone. I'd told her, though. Her warning from the night before echoed in my mind. You've shaken something loose, Nadia. Vivian's afraid of you, and that means you're closer to the truth than you realize. What truth? The locked door with its strange symbols haunted my thoughts, a puzzle piece I couldn't yet place. Derek arrived at 10 sharp, his usual polish, replaced by a disheveled vulnerability. His hair was unkempt, dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his navy coat hung loose as if he'd lost weight in the days since the dinner. He slid into the seat across from me, his hands fidgeting with a paper napkin. Nadia, he said, his voice raw. Thank you for meeting me. I nodded. My expression guarded the flame within me, flickering with both hope and caution. You wanted to talk? I said. So, talk. He took a deep breath, his eyes searching mine, and for the first time I saw something new in them, regret unguarded and real. I messed up, he said, his voice breaking. I should have stood up for you at the dinner. I should have seen how Mom was treating you, not just that night, but for years. I was blind, Nadia, and I'm so sorry. His words were a balm to the wound his silence had left, but they weren't enough, not yet. The flame within me burned steadily, demanding more than apologies. Why didn't you? I asked, my voice calm but unyielding. 2 years. Derek. 2 years of your mother's slights, her exclusions, her comparisons to Julia. You saw it all, and you did nothing. Why? He looked down at the table, shredding the napkin into tiny pieces. I didn't want to believe it was that bad, he admitted. Mom's always been intense, controlling. I thought if I gave her time, she'd come around. I didn't want to fight with her, not when Dad's retirement was putting so much pressure on the family. But that's no excuse. I failed you. His admission stirred something in me, a mix of pain and pity, but also a spark of recognition. Derek wasn't just apologizing. He was confronting a truth he'd avoided for years. There's more, I said, leaning forward, my voice low. Your mother's letter from her lawyer accusing me of theft, that wasn't just spite. It was calculated like everything she does. What's she hiding? Derek. What's behind that locked door in the mansion, the one with the symbols? His eyes widened, a flicker of fear passing through them, before he masked it. It's just a storage room, he said too quickly. Old family stuff. Don't lie to me, I said, the flame flaring with my words. I saw the way Vivian watched me when I was near it. I felt something like it was calling to me. What is it? Derek hesitated, his fingers tightening around the napkin remnants. I don't know everything, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Mom's always been private about certain family matters, things from her side, from her parents. She says it's tradition, but I've never pushed. I should have. His vagueness only deepened the mystery, but it also confirmed my instincts. The locked door was more than storage. It was a vault of secrets, and my presence threatened to unlock it. There's something else, Derek said, his voice dropping lower. After you left the dinner, Dad confronted Mom. I've never seen him like that, angry, resolute. He told her he was ashamed that he'd let her control things for too long. He mentioned Margot said he regretted not standing up for her years ago. I leaned back, the mention of Margot sending a shiver through me. What do you mean, standing up for her? I asked. Derek's eyes were distant, as if piecing together a memory. Dad and Margot were close in college, more than friends, I think. Mom never liked it. She told me once that Margot was unsuitable, that her family didn't have the right connections. Dad married Mom instead, but he's always kept in touch with Margot. I think it's why Mom tolerates her at family events, even though she hates it. The revelation was a jolt, a piece of the puzzle snapping into place. Margot's cryptic warnings, her connection to William. It wasn't just friendship. There was history, perhaps love, and Vivian's resentment was a thread in the web she'd woven to control her family. Your mother's afraid of me. I said, my voice steady. Not just because I'm not Julia, not just because of my background. There's something about me, about what I represent, that threatens her. What is it, Derek? He shook his head, his expression torn. I don't know, Nadia. But I want to find out. I want to fix this for us. He reached for my hand, but I pulled back, the flame within me urging caution. I'm not sure there's an us to fix. I said, my voice soft but firm. You let me stand alone at that dinner. You let your mother dictate our marriage. I need more than words, Derek. I need action. He nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I know. I've already told Mom she needs to respect you or I'll limit contact with her. I've started looking into therapy couples therapy for us. I want to learn how to be the husband you deserve, not the son she expects. His words were earnest, and for the first time I saw a spark in him, a resolve that mirrored my own. There's a therapist, Dr. Rivera, he continued. She specializes in family dynamics. I've booked a session for next week. Will you come, just one session, to see if we can start over? I studied him, the flame within me, flickering between hope and doubt. The coffee shop's hum faded, and for a moment it was just us two people caught in a web of secrets and choices. One session, I said finally, my voice measured, "But this isn't just about us, Derek. There's something bigger at play, something your mother's hiding. I need to know what it is, and I need you to be honest with me, no matter what we find." He nodded, relief softening his features. "I promise, Nadia, no more secrets." But even as he spoke, I felt a pulse like the one I'd sensed near the locked door. Was Derek truly unaware of his family's secrets, or was he still bound by Vivian's influence? The flame within me burned brighter, whispering that the answers lay ahead in the shadows of the Harrington legacy. As we parted, Derek's hand lingered on the table, as if reluctant to let go of the moment. I walked back to Margot's, the October air sharp against my skin, but my steps were steady. The coffee shop meeting had been a step toward reconciliation, but it was also a step toward the truth. Margot was waiting when I arrived, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "How did it go?" she asked, pouring tea as I sank onto her couch. "He apologized," I said, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. "He wants to try therapy to stand up to Vivian. But there's more, Margot. He mentioned you and William, something about a relationship. What happened?" Her expression softened, a shadow of old pain crossing her face. "William and I were in love," once she said, her voice quiet. "But his family, Vivian's family, really saw me as beneath them. They pressured him to choose her, and he did. I don't blame him, not entirely. But it's why I've stayed close, why I see what Vivian does to those who threaten her control." Her words were a revelation, another thread in the tapestry of secrets. "There's a locked door in the mansion," I said, my voice low. I felt something when I was near it, like it was calling to me. "Do you know what's behind it?" Margot's eyes darkened, her fingers tightening around her mug. "I've never seen it open," she admitted, "but I've heard stories, old ones from William's mother. The Harringtons have a legacy, Nadia, something tied to their wealth, their power. It's not just money, it's something else. And you, with your strength, your fire, you're stirring it." Her words sent a chill through me, but they also fueled the flame within. I was no longer just fighting for my marriage or my place in the family. I was fighting for the truth, for the power that Vivian feared, and I was only beginning to understand. As I sipped my tea, the pulse of that locked door echoed in my mind, a call to uncover the secrets that bound the Harringtons, and to claim the strength that was mine by right. The coffee shop meeting with Derek lingered in my mind like a half-remembered dream, its promise of reconciliation, both a beacon and a warning. I was Nadia, the woman who'd faced Vivian Harrington's venom and walked away with a fire burning in my chest, a fire that felt less like defiance and more like a power I was only beginning to grasp. The locked door in the Harrington mansion, its strange symbols pulsing in my memory, whispered of secrets tied to the family's legacy. As I agreed to try therapy with Derek, I knew this wasn't just about saving our marriage. It was about uncovering the truth. Vivian feared the truth that made me a threat in her carefully controlled world. Our first session with Dr. Rivera took place in a quiet office in downtown Hartford, its walls lined with books and soft lighting that felt like a sanctuary from the storm of the past weeks. Dr. Rivera was a woman in her 50s, her dark hair streaked with silver, her eyes sharp yet kind, as if she could see the threads of pain and strength woven through us. Derek sat beside me, his hands clasped tightly, his usual confidence replaced by a nervous energy. I wore a simple sweater, my armor now the flame within me, its warmth steadying my resolve. "Nadia Derek, let's start with why you're here." Dr. Rivera said, her voice calm but probing. I took a deep breath, the flame flickering as I spoke. "I want to know if our marriage can be saved," I said, my voice steady, despite the ache in my chest. But more than that, I want to understand why I've been treated like an outsider by Derek's family, especially his mother Vivian, and why Derek hasn't stood up for me until now. Derek shifted his jaw, tightening. I've apologized for that. He said, his voice low. I was wrong not to defend Nadia sooner. My mother's intense, and I didn't see how bad it was until the retirement dinner. Dr. Rivera nodded, her pen poised over her notebook. Derek, can you share what intense means to you? What role has your mother played in your life, and how has that affected your marriage? The question opened a floodgate. Derek spoke haltingly at first, then with growing clarity about growing up under Vivian's control, her expectations, her need for perfection, her subtle manipulations. She always made it seem like pleasing her was the same as protecting the family. He set his eyes on his hands. I didn't realize how much I was letting her dictate my choices, even with Nadia. His words were a revelation, a crack in the facade he'd maintained for years. I felt a pang of sympathy, but the flame within me demanded more than understanding. It demanded accountability. And you, Nadia, Dr. Rivera, turned to me, her gaze steady. What do you need from Derek to move forward? I paused, the weight of the question settling over me. I need him to see me. I said, my voice raw, not as an extension of his family, but as his partner. I need him to stand up to Vivian, to choose me over her control. And I need answers about why she's so afraid of me, about what she's hiding. The words felt like a spell, their truth resonating in the quiet room. Dr. Rivera's eyes flickered as if she sensed the deeper current beneath my words, the mystery tied to the locked door and the Harrington legacy. The session ended with a plan weekly meetings to rebuild trust with Derek, committing to set boundaries with Vivian. As we left, he reached for my hand, and this time I let him take it. I'm trying, Nadia, he said, his voice earnest. I know it's not enough yet, but I'm trying. I nodded, the flame within me flickering with cautious hope. Keep trying, I said, but I need to see it, not just hear it. The next step came sooner than I expected. A week later, Derek called, his voice tense but determined. I've set up a meeting with my parents at Dad's office, he said. Neutral ground. I want to talk about what happened, to set things straight. Will you come? I hesitated, the memory of Vivian's venom still sharp, but the flame urged me forward. I'll be there, I said, sensing this was more than a conversation. It was a chance to confront the shadows of the Harrington family. William's office was a sleek space of glass and steel, a stark contrast to the mansion's opulence. William greeted me with a warmth I hadn't seen before, his silver hair catching the light as he shook my hand. Nadia, I'm glad you're here, he said, his voice tinged with regret. Vivian sat across from him, her posture rigid, her designer suit a shield against the vulnerability I sensed beneath her surface. Derek stood beside me, his hand brushing mine, a silent promise of support. I asked you here because things need to change, Derek began, his voice steady. Mom, the way you've treated Nadia is unacceptable. The exclusions, the comments, the lawyer's letter, it stops now. If you can't respect my wife, I'll have to limit contact with you. His words were a thunderclap, a declaration I hadn't dared hope for. Vivian's eyes narrowed, but William raised a hand, his expression firm. He's right, Vivian. I've let this go on too long. Nadia's family, and it's time we treated her as such. Vivian's composure cracked, her voice sharp. You're siding with her, after everything I've done to protect this family's legacy. The word legacy sent a pulse through me, the same one I'd felt near the locked door. What legacy, Vivian? I asked, my voice calm but unyielding. What are you so afraid I'll uncover? Her eyes widened, a flicker of fear passing through them. Before she masked it. You're imagining things, she said, but her voice trembled, betraying her. Derek stepped forward, his tone resolute. If there's something you're hiding, Mom, it's time to come clean. Nadia deserves the truth, and so do I. Vivian's gaze darted to William, then back to me, her hands clenching in her lap. There's nothing to tell, she said, but the lie was palpable, a thread in the web she'd woven for years. William cleared his throat, his voice softer now. Vivian, perhaps it's time we considered family therapy, not just for Nadia and Derek, but for all of us. We've let old patterns dictate too much. To my surprise, Vivian didn't refuse outright. She nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line as if conceding a battle, but not the war. Fine, she said. I'll do it for the family. The weeks that followed were a slow unraveling of the Harringtons' facade. In family therapy sessions with Dr. Rivera, Vivian's defenses began to crack. She spoke of her childhood, raised in a family obsessed with status where love was conditional on perfection. I was taught to protect the family at all costs, she admitted, her voice tight. Nadia's independence, her refusal to bend it, felt like a threat to everything I'd built. Her words were not an apology, but they were a glimpse into the fear that drove her, a fear tied to the legacy she guarded so fiercely. Derek, too, began to change. He attended every therapy session, his commitment evident in small but meaningful actions, calling to check on me, planning dinners that were just for us, standing up to Vivian when she slipped into old habits. He began asking questions about the locked door, pressing William for answers that were met with vague deflections. It's just family history, William would say, but his eyes held a shadow of something unspoken, a secret that seemed to pulse in time with the flame within me. Over time, the family dynamic shifted. Elaine invited me to lunch, her usual competitiveness softened by a genuine desire to connect. I was wrong to stay silent, she said, her eyes meeting mine. I want to be better, Nadia. You're family now. Michael and Stephanie hosted a small dinner, their warmth a stark contrast to the chill of the retirement dinner. Even William grew closer, sharing stories of his early days at the firm, his regret for not challenging Vivian sooner. You remind me of Margot, he said once, his voice wistful. She never let anyone define her either. The most profound change came at a family dinner 6 months later, held at the mansion, but stripped of its former formality. Derek had insisted on a simpler affair, and to my surprise, Vivian complied. The table was set for all of us, including me, with a place card bearing my name in elegant calligraphy. As the main course was served grilled salmon, not a salad in sight, Vivian caught my eye, her expression unreadable but softer than before. Later, I noticed our wedding photo on the wall, framed among the others, a quiet acknowledgement of my place. As we ate, I felt the flame within me settle, no longer a blaze but a steady glow. It was still there, whispering of the locked door of secrets, yet to be uncovered, but for the first time, I felt a sense of belonging. The therapy sessions had begun to unravel the Harringtons' patterns, revealing the vulnerabilities beneath their polished exterior. Vivian's fear, I realized, wasn't just about me. It was about losing control over a legacy she didn't fully understand herself. The locked door remained a mystery, but I sensed I was closer to its truth, guided by the power within me. That night, as Derek and I drove back to our apartment, he reached for my hand, his touch warm and steady. We're building something new. He said, his voice soft. Not just with my family, but with us. I nodded, the flame within me glowing with hope. The journey wasn't over. There were still secrets to uncover, truths to face, but I was no longer alone. I was Nadia, bearer of a fire that had burned through Vivian's web, and I was ready for whatever lay beyond the locked door. The October chill had given way to the gentle warmth of spring, and with it my life began to bloom in ways I hadn't dared imagine. I was Nadia, the woman who'd faced Vivian Harrington's icy dominion, and emerged not just unbroken, but stronger, carrying a flame within me that burned with a quiet, unshakable power. The therapy sessions, the confrontation at the retirement dinner, and the slow unraveling of the Harrington family's facade had changed everything. Yet the mystery of the locked door in the mansion, its strange symbols pulsing in my memory, remained a shadow on the edge of my mind, a secret I knew I was destined to uncover. 6 months had passed since the family dinner, where Vivian for the first time set a place for me at the table our wedding photo, now hanging among the others on the mansion's walls. The gesture was small but seismic, a crack in the fortress of her control. Derek had kept his promise attending therapy with me weekly, his actions speaking louder than his words ever had. He planned dinners, just for us simple evenings of pasta and laughter in our apartment, far from the opulence of his family's world. He challenged Vivian when she slipped into old habits, his voice firm but calm a shield I hadn't realized I'd needed. Nadia's my wife, he'd say, his hand finding mine. She's family mom, and that's not negotiable. The family therapy sessions with Dr. Rivera had peeled back layers of the Harrington legacy, revealing not just Vivian's fears, but the vulnerabilities that drove her. She spoke of her upbringing, a world of rigid expectations, where love was a currency earned through perfection. I thought I was protecting the family, she admitted in one session, her voice tight with emotion. But I see now how I pushed you away, Nadia. It wasn't about you. It was about what you stirred in me. Her words weren't a full apology, but they were a start, a thread of truth in the web she'd woven for decades. Yet the locked door lingered a mystery that pulsed in time with the flame within me. I'd asked William about it during a quiet moment at the dinner, my voice casual but my heart racing. "What's behind that door in the east wing?" I'd said, watching his face. His smile faltered, his eyes flicking to Vivian before he answered. "Just old family records," he said too quickly. "Nothing of interest." But the flame within me flared, sensing the lie. Margot, sitting beside me, squeezed my hand under the table, her eyes gleaming with a knowing light. "Patience," she whispered later. "The truth will come when you're ready." That readiness came in an unexpected way. One morning, as Derek and I sat in our kitchen, sunlight streaming through the window, I felt a shift within me, not just emotional but physical. A wave of nausea, a flutter in my stomach that wasn't nerves. I slipped into the bathroom, my hands trembling as I took a pregnancy test. The two pink lines stared back at me, a revelation that sent the flame within me soaring. I was pregnant, carrying a new life, a new beginning. When I told Derek, his face lit up, his arms wrapping around me with a tenderness that felt like home. "We're going to be parents," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I promise, Nadia, I'll protect our child from the patterns of my family, from my mother's control." His words were a vow, one that echoed the fire within me. But they also stirred the mystery of the locked door. If I was to bring a child into this family, I needed to know the truth, what Vivian feared, what the Harrington legacy truly meant. I confided in Margot over tea at her cottage, the scent of lavender grounding me as I shared the news. "A baby," she said, her eyes sparkling with joy. "That's a powerful thing, Nadia. A new life, a new spark. But it also means you need to be ready for what's behind that door." "What is it?" "Margot," I asked, my voice low, the flame pulsing with urgency. "What's Vivian hiding?" She leaned closer, her voice a whisper, as if the walls might listen. "The Harringtons have always had something more than wealth, a gift or perhaps a burden passed down through generations. Vivian's mother spoke of it once, a power tied to their lineage locked away to protect it. I don't know the details, but I know you feel it, Nadia. That fire in you, it's not just yours. It's connected to them, and it's why Vivian's afraid." Her words were a key, unlocking a door in my mind, if not the one in the mansion. The flame within me wasn't just defiance. It was a spark of something ancient, something the Harringtons had guarded for generations. Was it a literal power, a mystical force, or a metaphorical strength tied to their legacy? I didn't know, but I felt its truth in my bones, a call to claim what was mine. The final piece of the puzzle came at William's birthday dinner, a smaller affair than the retirement gala held in the mansion's garden under a canopy of stars. The table was set for 10, including me, and for the first time I felt a sense of belonging. Vivian was quieter, her usual sharpness softened by the months of therapy. As we ate a menu of roasted lamb and fresh vegetables, no salads in sight, she caught my eye, her expression unreadable, but not hostile. "Nadia," she said, her voice steady. "I've added your wedding photo to the family album. It belongs there?" It was the closest she'd come to an apology, and though it wasn't enough to erase the past, it was a step toward healing. After dinner, as guests mingled, I wandered into the mansion drawn to the east wing. The locked door stood before me, its symbols glinting in the dim light, their curves and lines seeming to pulse in time with my heartbeat. I placed my hand on the handle, expecting resistance, but it turned with a soft click. The door swung open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. A chill ran through me, but the flame within burned brighter, urging me forward. I took a step, then stopped, hearing Derek's voice behind me. "Nadia, what are you doing?" I turned, my heart racing. "I need to know." I said, my voice steady. "Whatever's down there, it's part of this family and part of me." Derek hesitated, then nodded his hand, finding mine. "Then we'll find out together." He said, his eyes meeting mine with a resolve that mirrored my own. We descended the stairs, the flame within me, guiding us a beacon in the darkness. What we found was a small room, its walls lined with shelves of leather-bound journals and artifacts etched with the same symbols as the door. A single book lay open on a table, its pages filled with handwritten notes about the Harrington lineage, a legacy of influence, not just wealth, tied to a mysterious gift of intuition and resilience. The notes spoke of a matriarch in each generation, a woman who carried the spark, a power to shape destinies. Vivian had tried to suppress it, fearing its strength, but I, an outsider, had awakened it. I closed the book, the flame within me settling into a warm glow. The mystery wasn't fully solved. There were pages yet to read, secrets yet to uncover, but I had found enough for now. I was Nadia, daughter of survivors, bearer of a spark that had burned through Vivian's control and illuminated my place in this family. Derek squeezed my hand, his eyes bright with pride. "You're incredible," he said, and for the first time I believed him fully. As we returned to the garden, the stars above seemed to shine brighter, a reflection of the light within me. I thought of the child growing inside me, a new spark to carry forward. The Harrington legacy was no longer a shadow. It was a story I would help write, one of strength, truth, and love. I looked at Vivian, laughing with Elaine under the canopy, and felt not anger, but understanding. She'd feared my fire, but it had warmed us all, forging a new path for our family. To those watching, I say, this: stand up for your truth, even when it shakes the foundations of those around you. Share your stories as I've shared mine, because the spark within you is a power no one can extinguish. The locked door was only the beginning, but it led me to a future where I was no longer an outsider, but a woman who claimed her place, her fire, and her legacy.